so many people as those who are studying this philosophy? Well, we're on a marvelous lesson tonight, the subject of accurate thinking. You know, the thing that everybody talks about and hardly anybody ever does. Accurate thinking. What a marvelous thing it is to be able to analyze facts, think accurately, make decisions based upon accurate thinking rather than upon emotional feelings. The majority of opinions of decisions that you make, and I and everybody else for that matter, are based upon things that we desire or things that we feel, not upon the facts necessarily at all. And when it comes to a showdown between your emotional feelings, the things you feel like doing, and the things that your head tells you you ought to do, which one do you think wins the most?
Feeling.
What's the matter with the head that it doesn't get a better chance, do you suppose? Why isn't it consulted more? Very good, very good. The sparks are flying. I can see that. Someone has said that most people do not think, they just think that they think. And I think that just about covers it. Now, there are certain simple rules and regulations that you can apply, and this lesson covers every one of them, that will help you avoid the mistakes, the common mistakes of inaccurate thinking, that is, of snap judgments and of being pushed around by your emotions. You know, the truth of the matter is that your emotions are not reliable at all. Take the emotion of love, for instance. It's the greatest and grandest of all of the emotions, and yet the most dangerous by the same token. And perhaps more trouble, more difficulty in human relationship grows out of misunderstanding of the emotion of love than for all other sources combined. Well, let's begin at the beginning on accurate thinking and see just what it is. First of all, there are two kinds of thinking based upon three major fundamentals as follows. Inductive reasoning based on assumption of unknown facts or hypotheses. Then there's deductive reasoning based on known facts or what is believed to be known facts. Then there's logic, that is guidance by past experience similar to those under consideration. Now those are the three types of thinking that we do. And which one do you say that we put into operation most? Inductive reasoning or deductive reasoning or logic? Do you think we? I don't. Now, inductive reasoning is based on assumption of unknown facts or hypotheses. You just assume, you don't know the facts, but you assume that they exist, and you create them and base your judgment on what you have created. Now, when you do that, you must keep your fingers crossed and be ready to change your decision readily, because your reasoning may not prove to be accurate, because you're basing it upon assumed facts. But deductive reasoning is based on known facts or what is believed to be known facts. Now that's where you have all of the facts before you, and you can deduce from those facts certain things that you ought to do for your benefit or to carry out your desires. And that is that's supposed to be the type of reasoning or thinking that the majority of people engage in, only they don't do a very good job of it. Now there are two major steps in accurate thinking, and they are, first of all, separate facts from fiction or hearsay evidence. That's the first step. Before you do any thinking at all, you must find out whether you're dealing with facts or fiction, real evidence or hearsay evidence. And if you're dealing with fiction or hearsay evidence, it behooves you to be exceptionally careful, to keep an open mind and not to reach a final decision until you have examined those facts very carefully. And second, separate facts into two classes: important and unimportant. Now, what is an important fact? You will be surprised when I tell you that the vast majority of facts that we deal with, I'm talking about facts now, not hearsay evidence, not hypotheses, the vast number of facts that the majority of us deal with day in, day out are relatively unimportant. Why? Well, let's see what an important fact is, and then you'll know why. An important fact may be assumed to be any fact that can be used to advantage in the attainment of one's major purpose or any subordinate desire leading toward the attainment of one's major purpose. Now that's what an important fact is. And I wouldn't miss it very much, I suspect, if I said that the vast majority of people spend more time on irrelevant facts that have nothing whatsoever to do with their advancement than they do on facts that would be of benefit to them. Curiosity people, people that meddle in other people's affairs, gossipers, and all that sort of thing, putting in a lot of time thinking and talking about other people's affairs, dealing with petty small talk and petty facts, in other words, dealing with unimportant facts. If you doubt that what I've just said is true, take inventory of the facts that you deal with for one whole day and just sum up at the end of the day and see how many really important facts you have been dealing with. It'd be better to do this on a Sunday, on an off day when you're away from your occupation or your business, because that's where an idle mind usually goes to work on unimportant facts. Now, opinions are usually without value because they are based on bias, prejudice, intolerance, guesswork, or hearsay evidence. It's surprising to take inventory and find out how many people have how many opinions on how many things that have no basis whatsoever, except the way they feel or what somebody said to them or what newspaper they read or what influence they've come under. Most of our opinions come as a result of influences that we don't have any control over. Free advice volunteered by friends and acquaintances is usually not worthy of consideration. Why?
Not based on facts.
Not based upon facts and too much small talk mixed up in it. That last part of the sentence there is not meant to be funny. Free advice volunteered by friends and acquaintances is usually not worthy of consideration. What kind of advice is the most desirable advice when you need advice? How do you go about getting it, and what kind of advice would you recommend? Someone who is a specialist, who's known to be a specialist in connection with a problem at hand, and go and pay him for his services. Don't go after any for free advice. And speaking of free advice, I just want to tell you what happened to a friend of mine first, and then a student out in California. For 3 years, he used to come over to my house every weekend and spend 3 or 4 hours, for which I ordinarily would get $50 an hour, but I didn't get anything from him because he was a friend and acquaintance. So he'd come over there to get 3 or 4 hours of free counsel, and, well, I gave it to him. I gave it to him every time he came, but he didn't hear a single word that I said. Not a word. That went on for 3 years. And finally he came over. One afternoon, and I said, "Now look here, Elmer. I have been giving you free counsel for 3 years, and you haven't heard a darn thing." Only darn's not the word I use. No, you haven't heard a darn thing that I've been saying. Now, you'll never get any value out of this counsel that I'm giving until you start paying for it. Now, why don't you just go ahead? We're starting a master course right away. Why don't you go ahead and join that course like everybody else, and then you commence getting some value. He took out his checkbook and gave me a check for the master course, and entered the course and went through it. And I want to tell you that his business affairs began to thrive from that moment on. I have never seen a man grow and develop so fast. After he paid a substantial sum for some counsel, he commenced listening to it and putting it into action. And that's human nature I'm talking about. I'm telling you it is, for a fact. Free advice, it's just about worth what it costs. Everything in this world is worth just about what it costs. Love and friendship. What are love and friendship worth?
A lot.
Do they have any price?
No.
Well, now you try and get love and friendship without paying the price and see how far you go. Those are two things that you can only get by giving them. You can only get the real McCoy by giving the real McCoy. That's the only way you can get them. And if you try to mooch, get friendship and love without giving in return, your source of supply will soon play out. Accurate thinkers permit no one to do their thinking for them. Now, what do you think about that? How many people are there that permit the circumstances and influences and radio and television and newspapers and other people and relatives to do the thinking for them? How many do you think, what percentage would you say of the people permit that? 97, 99, and somebody said 100. Well, it's not quite that bad. Not quite. But I want to tell you the percentages are way up there. No fooling. Allowing other people to do the thinking for them. If I have one asset that I feel proudest of, and I do, I have one that I feel really proud of, and I bet you'd never guess what it is.
Think for yourself.
Well, now, what is it?
Courage of your conviction.
I have an asset. I have an asset that I'm very proud of. It has nothing to do with money, nor bank accounts, nor bonds, nor stocks, or anything of that kind. It's something more precious than that. I have learned to hear all evidence, get all of the facts I can from all of the sources, and then put them together in my own way and have the last word in making my own thinking. That doesn't mean that I'm a know-it-all, or that I am a doubting Thomas, or that I don't seek counsel. I certainly do seek counsel. But when I have gotten that counsel, I determine how much of it I will accept and how much of it I will reject. Certainly, when I make a decision, nobody could ever say that it isn't a decision of Napoleon Hill, albeit it might be a decision based upon a mistake. It might be an error. It's still mine. I did it, and nobody influenced me. That doesn't mean that I'm hard-hearted, that I have no, my friends have no influence on me. They do. Certainly they do. But I determine how much influence they have on me and what reaction I will have to their influence. Certainly I would never permit a friend to have such influence on me as to cause me to damage some other person just because that friend wanted it done, and that's been tried many times. I would never permit that. Doing your own thinking, well, I want to tell you that I think the angels in heaven cry out when they discover a man or a woman that does his or her own thinking and doesn't allow the relatives and friends and enemies and other people to discourage the business of accurate thinking. The reason I'm emphasizing this, ladies and gentlemen, is because the majority of people never do take possession of their own minds, the most valuable asset that anybody has, the only thing that the Creator gave you that you have complete control over, and the one thing that you generally don't ever discover and use, but you allow other people to kick it around like a football. I'm not talking to you. You understand that, of course. I'm talking about they. That is, they who are not here in this class. I don't know why it is that in our educational system or somewhere in our system of teaching or writing, I don't know why it is that before now people haven't been informed that they have the greatest asset in the world, an asset sufficient unto all of their needs, and that asset consists in their privilege of using their own mind and thinking their own thoughts and directing those own thoughts to whatever objective they choose, and yet they don't do it. Why? Why? Tell me why.
Too lazy.
Too lazy, said someone.
They don't know they have it.
That's the idea. They don't know they have it. There has not been the proper system of education. And I want to tell you that wherever this philosophy touches, wherever it begins to touch, you see people blossom out as they never blossomed out before. It makes a difference because they begin to find out that they have a mind, that they can use that mind, and that they can make it do whatever they want it to do. I don't say that they all run in immediately and take possession of their own mind, but they rather kind of sneak in or slip in a little at a time. But eventually the affairs of their lives begins to change, and the reason they change is that they discover this great mind power and start using it. It's not safe to form opinions based upon newspaper reports. I see by the papers is a prefatory remark, usually brands the speaker as a snap judgment thinker. I see by the papers, or I hear tell, or they say. How often have you heard those terms? They say, so when I hear anybody start off with that, mentally I pull down my earmuffs and don't hear a doggone thing that they say because I know it's not worth hearing. When anybody starts to give me information and identifies the source by saying, I see by the papers, or they say, or I hear tell, I don't pay any attention to what's said whatsoever. Not the slightest attention. Not that what they are saying might not be accurate, but then I know that the source is faulty, and therefore the chances are that the statement is faulty also. Scandalmongers and gossipers are not reliable sources from which to procure facts on any subject whatsoever. Now, why is that true?
Because they're biased.
Well, no, they're not reliable, and also they're biased. Did you know that when you hear anybody speak in a derogatory way of anybody else, whether you know the person or either one of the persons or not, the very fact that one person speaks in a derogatory way of another person puts you on guard and gives you the responsibility of studying and analyzing very closely everything that's said. Because you know you're listening to a biased person. You know that. I think the human brain is a wonderful thing. You know, the Creator, I just marvel at how smart He was in creating a human being, giving a human being all of the equipment, and all of the machinery, and all of the mechanism with which to detect lies from falsehood from truth. There is ever something present in the falsehood that does notify the listener of it. It's there. You can tell it. You can feel it. And the same thing by the same token when someone is speaking the truth. The most finished actor in the world couldn't deceive you if you would use your innate intelligence in reference to statements that are made. Scandalmongers. Now, by the same token, when you hear someone overpraised by a doting or loving friend, what about that? Well, now that's a compliment, and it's less dangerous to depend upon that. But certainly, if you want the accurate facts, then you will study the remarks of a complimentary nature just as closely as you study the others. For instance, if I send somebody to you for a job, and I send along a letter, a very, very laudatory letter, or get you on the telephone and give you a sales pitch about what a marvelous person this person is, if you're an accurate thinker, you're going to know that I'm rubbing it on pretty thick, and you better be very careful how much of it you accept, that you better do a little outside investigating. Is that right? Now, please understand, I'm not trying to make doubting Thomases out of you. I'm not trying to make cynics out of you. But I am trying to bring to your attention the necessity of using this God-given brain that you have with which to think accurately and with which to search for the facts, albeit though when you find the facts they may not be what you're looking for, but there they are. There are a lot of people you know who fool themselves, and there's no worse fooling in this world than the fooling that one does for himself. That old Chinese proverb which says, "If a man fool me once, shame on the man. You fool me twice, shame on me." People just never seem to think that, to do a little accurate thinking, a little investigating, you know. And you can't imagine, you'd think that bankers, for instance, would be so shrewd that a confidence man couldn't come in and take them. And I heard one of the most outstanding confidence men in the world, Barney Birch. I don't know what's ever happened to him, but he used to operate here in Chicago. I got acquainted with him once and interviewed him on several occasions. And I asked him what type of men were the easiest victims. Why, he said bankers, because they think they're so damn smart. You know, I'm quoting him. Just what he said. Well, anyhow, you'll not pay too much attention to scandalmongers and gossipers. Wishes often are fathers to facts, and most people have a bad habit of assuming facts to harmonize with their desires. Did you know that? Yeah. Therefore, you have to look in the looking glass when you're searching for this business of locating the person who can do accurate thinking. You've got to put yourself under suspicion a little bit too, haven't you? Because if you wish a thing to be true, oftentimes you'll assume that it is true, and you will act as if it were. If you love a person, you'll overlook his faults. You'll never see his faults if you love him a great deal. But really and truly, we do need to watch ourselves in connection with those whom we admire most. until they have proved themselves entirely, because I have admired a great many people who turned out to be very dangerous indeed. As a matter of fact, I think most of my troubles back in my early days came from trusting people too much, letting them use my name. And sometimes they wouldn't use it wisely. That's happened 5 or 6 times in my life. Because I trusted the people. Why did I trust them? Well, because I knew them, and they were nice people, and they said and did the things that I liked. Be careful of the fellow that says and does the things you like, because you're going to overlook his faults. Don't be too hard on the man who steps on your corns and causes you to re-examine yourself. Don't be too hard on him, because he may be the most important friend you ever had in your life. The person who maybe irritates you, but causes you to examine yourself carefully. We all like to meet and associate with people who agree with us. That's human nature. But oftentimes the people, some people that you associate with who agree with you and who are very nice and lovely come to the point where they can take advantage of you, and they do. Now, information is abundant, and most of it is free, but facts have an elusive habit, and generally there is a price attached to them. Certainly the price is painstaking labor in examining them for accuracy. That's the least of the price that you have to pay for facts. And this question, how do you know, is the favorite question of the thinker. When a thinker has here's a statement that he can't accept, immediately he says to the speaker, how do you know? What is your source of information? This business of asking people to identify their source of knowledge, and oftentimes if you have the slightest doubt, if you do that, you put the person right out on a limb. He won't be able to do it. Or if you ask him how he knows, he'll tell you, well, I believe so. Well, now how right of you to believe anything unless it's based upon something, unless you can give some background for it? I believe there's a God. A lot of people do. But I'll bet you there are a lot of people who say that they believe in a God who couldn't give you the slightest evidence of him if you backed them into a corner. I can give you evidence. When I say that I believe in a God and you say, how do you know? I can give you all of the evidence. I don't have so much evidence in connection with anything else in this world as I do in connection with the existence of a Creator. Because the orderliness of this universe couldn't go on and on eons and eons of times ad infinitum without a first cause and without a plan back of it. You know that's absolutely true. And yet there are a lot of people who undertake to prove the presence of God in devious ways that, in my book of rules, wouldn't be evidence at all. Anything that exists, including God, is capable of proof. And where there is no such proof available, it is safe to assume that nothing exists. Now, when no facts are available for the basis of an opinion or a judgment or a plan, turn to logic for guidance. No one has ever seen God, but logic says that he exists of necessity. He has to exist, or we wouldn't be here. We couldn't be here without a first cause, a higher intelligence than ourselves. We couldn't be here. And that thing called logic, it's a wonderful thing. You know, there are times when you have a hunch, you have a feeling that certain things are true or certain things are not true, and you better be careful to pay high respect to that hunch or those feelings. Because that's probably infinite intelligence trying to break through the outer shell and to let you use a little logic. If one of you got up and said, now my definite major aim is to make $1 million this coming year. Well, what would I say if you did that? What would be the first question I would ask you, do you think?
How do you think you know?
Yeah, how? How are you going to do it? I want to hear your plan. And then after I hear your plan, what am I going to do about it? Am I going to accept it or reject it? What am I going to do about it?
Analyze.
I'm going to weigh you, first of all, your ability to get $1 million and to find out what you're going to give for it, and then my logic will tell me whether or not your plan for doing it is probable and workable and practical. Now that doesn't take an awful lot of intelligent thinking, but it's a very important thing to do. And I'd go over it, I'd analyze your plan, I'd analyze you, I'd analyze your capabilities, I'd analyze your past experience, your past achievements, I'd analyze the people that you're going to help, get to help you make that $1 million. And when we got through analyzing, I would be able to tell you that, well, probably you can do it. Or I'd be able to point out to you that probably it'll take longer than the year that you said. Maybe it'll take 2 years, maybe it'll take 3. And then again, probably I might tell you that you wouldn't be able to do it at all. If my reasoning taught me that that was the answer, well, I'd give it to you just that way. I've had some of my students, some of them sitting right here in this room, come out and put propositions before me which I had to turn down and tell them to just absolutely forget about it because they're wasting their time. Now that's the way an accurate thinker proceeds. He doesn't allow his emotions to run away with him. If I allowed my emotions to do my thinking for me, I would, anything that one of my students undertook to do, I'd tell him he could do it. Now that leads up to this famous motto or epigram that you've seen quoted a lot of times. You've heard it in my lessons. Whatever your mind can conceive and believe, your mind can achieve. I don't want anybody to misread that statement this way by saying, reading into it, whatever your mind can conceive and believe, your mind will achieve. I said it can achieve. Do you get the line of difference there between the two? It can, but I don't know that it will. That's up to you. Only you know that. The extent to which you use your own mind, the extent to which you intensify your faith, the soundness of your judgments and your plans, all will be factors entering into how well you carry out that aphorism or that epigram. Whatever your mind can conceive and believe, your mind can achieve. Some acid tests now to be made and separated in facts from information. Let's see how we go about it. First of all, scrutinize with unusual care everything you read in newspapers or hear over the radio, and form the habit of never accepting any statement as a fact merely because you read it or heard it expressed by someone. Statements bearing some proportion of fact often are intentionally or carelessly colored to give them an erroneous meaning. A half-truth, in other words, is, someone has said, is more dangerous than an out-and-out lie. It's more dangerous because that half-truth part is liable to deceive somebody who knows that it's who understands half of it and thinks the whole of it is true. Scrutinize carefully everything you read in books, regardless of who wrote them. And never accept the works of any writer without asking the following questions and satisfying yourself as to the answers. And that would apply to lectures or statements or speeches or conversations or anything else. These rules that I'm going to give you. First of all, is the writer a recognized authority on the subject covered? The writer or the speaker or the teacher or the one that's making the statement. Is he a recognized authority on the subject on which he's speaking or writing? That's the first question that you ask. Next, did the writer or the speaker have an ulterior or a self-interest motive other than that of imparting accurate information? You know, the motive that prompts a man to write a book or to make a speech or to make a statement in public or in private conversation, the motive back of it is very important. And if you can get at a man's motive when he's talking, you can tell pretty well how truthful he is in what he's saying. Has the writer a profit interest or other interest in the subject on which he writes or speaks? You know, that when you find out what a man's motive is, whatever he's doing, if you can locate his motive in doing it, it'll be impossible for him to fool you in the least, because you'll be able to smell him out. And is the writer a person of sound judgment and not a fanatic on the subject on which he writes? I have seen a lot of people who are overzealous about to the point of fanaticism. If you wanted to judge me, for instance, you wouldn't judge me on account of the kind of a tie I wear, the kind of a suit I wear, or how I cut my hair, or how I used to cut my hair, and or how well I speak, or how poorly I speak. You wouldn't judge me by any of those things. You'd judge me by how much influence I'm having for good or evil on people. That's the way you would judge me. That's the way you would judge anybody else. You might not like a man's brand of religion or politics. But if he's doing a good job in his field and helping a lot of people and doing no damage, never mind about his brand. Don't condemn him if he's doing more good than he is harm, preponderantly more good than harm. Before accepting as facts statements by others, ascertain the motive which prompted the statements. Ascertain also the writer's reputation for truth and veracity. And scrutinize with unusual care all statements made by people who have strong motives or objectives they desire to attain through their statements. And be equally careful about accepting as facts the statements of overzealous people who have the habit of allowing their imaginations to run wild. Learn to be cautious and to use your own judgment no matter who is trying to influence you. Use your own judgment in final analysis. And what do you do if you can't trust your own judgment? Is there an answer in this philosophy for that? There certainly is. There certainly most definitely is an answer. And you know, there are a lot of times when an individual can't trust his own judgment because he doesn't know enough about the circumstances that he's faced with. He's got to turn to somebody with broader experience or a different education or a keener mind for analysis. He has got to do that. For instance, can you imagine a business succeeding who was all made up of master salesmen? Can you imagine that? Did you ever know such a business?
No.
I have. You'd think, why, that's wonderful. Master salesmen, why, they'll go out and bring in all the business in the world. Why, sure they do, and then spend all the money in the world, too, in doing it. You need a wet blanket man in every organization, and you need a hatchet man. A man will cut through the red tape and everything else that gets in his way and let the chips fall wherever they may. I wouldn't want to be a hatchet man. I wouldn't want to be a wet blanket man. But certainly I'd want one in those two in my organization if my operation was very extensive. In seeking facts from others, do not disclose to them what facts you expect to find. Now, why is that statement made?
He might tell you what you want to know.
If I say to you, by the way, you used to employ John Brown, and he's applied to me for a position. I think he's a wonderful man. What do you think? Well, if he has any faults, I'll certainly not get them with that kind of a question, will I? If I really wanted to find out about John Brown, who used to work for you, how would I go about getting the information? Well, I wouldn't go about getting it from you at all in the first place. I'd have the commercial credit company get an unbiased report on it from you. And you'd probably give out the facts to the credit rating company that you wouldn't give out to me or to anybody else. Surprising how much information you can get if you know the right commercial agency through which to get it. But oftentimes when you go direct for information about a man, unless it's very friendly and favorable, the chances are you won't get the real facts. You'll get a varnished or a watered down set of facts, don't you know? No, if you ask a man a question and you give him the slightest idea as to what you expect the answer to be, most people are lazy anyway. They don't want to go to too much trouble in explaining. But, well, they'll just give you the answer they know you want, and you're tickled to death, and you go on with it and then fall down on it later on. Science is the art of organizing and classifying facts. That's what science means. And when you wish to make sure you are dealing with facts, seek scientific sources for their testing where possible. Men of science have neither the reason nor the inclination to modify or to change facts nor to misrepresent. Isn't that an astounding thing? They just don't have the reason. Well, if they did, if they had that inclination, they would not be scientists, would they? They'd be pseudoscientists or fakes. And there are a lot of pseudoscientists and fakes in this world, believe you me, who assume to know things that they don't know. Your emotions are not always reliable. As a matter of fact, most of the time they're not reliable. And before being influenced too far by your feelings, give your head a chance to pass judgment on the business at hand. The head is more dependable than the heart, but what makes a good combination? Balancing them, and that's the idea, just balancing them so that both of them have an equal say, so to speak, and you're comforted you're coming up with the right answer if you do that. The person who forgets this generally regrets his neglect. Now, these are some of the major enemies of sound thinking. The emotion of love, for instance, stands right up at the head of the list. You'd think, why, how in the world could the emotion of love interfere with anybody's thinking? Yeah. If you said that, I'd know right away you hadn't had very many love experiences. If you've ever had an experience with love at all, you know very well how dangerous it is. It's like playing around TNT with a match in your hand. When it starts exploding, it doesn't give any notice. Then hatred and anger and jealousy and fear and revenge and greed and vanity and egotism and the desire for something for nothing and procrastination. All of these are enemies of thinking. You have to be on the lookout for them constantly and to be sure that you're free of them, provided that the thinking at hand is of importance to you and maybe your whole future destiny depends upon your thinking accurately. And isn't it the fact that it does? Doesn't your future destiny depend very largely on your accuracy or your lack of it in your thinking? Of course, if that were not true, then what would be the use of the Creator having given you complete control of your own mind? What good would it be? The answer is that mind is sufficient unto all of your needs, absolutely, at least on this lifespan. I don't know on the preceding plane where you came from or on the succeeding plane where you're going to. I don't know about those planes because I don't remember where I came from and I don't yet know where I'm going. I wish I did. But I know a great deal about where I am now. And I found out a great deal about how to influence my destiny here now so that I get a lot of pleasure out of it, so I get joy, so I give joy, so I make myself useful, and I justify my having passed this way. Why can I say that? Because I have discovered how to manipulate my own mind and keep it under control, make it do the things I want it to do. Throw off the circumstances I don't want and accept the ones that I do want. And if I don't find the circumstances I want, what do I do? Create them, of course. Create them. That's what definiteness of purpose and imagination are for. Now, your mind should be an eternal question mark. Question everything and everyone until you satisfy yourself that you are dealing with facts. Do this quietly in the silence of your own mind and avoid being known as a doubting Thomas. Don't come out and question people orally. That's not going to get you anywhere. But question them silently. And furthermore, if you're too outspoken and too oral about your questioning of people, it puts them on notice and they cover up and you don't get the information you want. Quietly go about seeking for information and doing some accurate thinking. You probably will come up with it. Be a good listener, but also be an accurate thinker as you listen. Which is most profitable, to be a good speaker or a good listener?
Good listener.
Why?
You can make a balance as to what they say.
I don't know of any virtue or any quality that will help an individual to get along in this world better than to be an effective, enthusiastic speaker. I just don't know of any other quality that will excel that one. And yet, I would follow that statement immediately by saying that it's far more profitable to anybody to be a good listener, an analytical listener, than it is to be a good speaker. Let your mind be an eternal question mark. Now, I don't mean by that you should become a cynic nor a doubting Thomas, but I mean that no matter who you're dealing with, deal with them on the basis of thinking accurately of every relationship that you have. You'll get a lot of satisfaction out of that. You'll also be more successful. And if you're tactful as you go along and diplomatic, you'll have a lot more substantial friends than you have by the old method of snap judgment. Mostly your friends, if you're an accurate thinker, mostly your friends will be friends worth having. Believe you me, they will. Your thinking habits are the results of social heredity and physical heredity. Watch both of these sources carefully, but particularly social heredity. Now, physical heredity, through physical heredity, you get everything that you are physically. The stature of your body, the shape of texture of your skin, color of your eyes and hair, and you're the sum total of all of your ancestors, back farther than you can ever remember or think. And you inherited a little of their good qualities and a little of their bad. And there's nothing you can do about that. That's static. It's fixed at birth. But by far the most important part of what you are is a result of your social heredity, that is your environmental influences, the things that you have allowed to go into your mind and that you've accepted as a part of your character. That's the important thing. Down at the bottom, your conscience was given to you as a guide when all other sources of knowledge and facts have been exhausted. Be careful to use it as a guide and not as a conspirator. Do you know a lot of people who use their consciences as a conspirator instead of a guide? In other words, they so sell their conscience on the idea that what they're doing is right that the conscience falls in line eventually and becomes a conspirator. Now then, if you sincerely wish to think accurate, there's a price that you must pay for this ability, a price which is not measurable in money. And first, you must learn to examine carefully all of your emotional feelings by submitting them to your sense of reason. That's step number one in accurate thinking. In other words, the things that you like to do best are the things that you should examine most and first, to make sure that if they lead you to the attainment of some object, that you want that object after you get it. The point I'm making is that the thing that you set your heart upon, be careful about the thing that you set your heart upon, because when you get it, sometimes you find out it's not what you wanted at all. Now, I could multiply that by 1,000 illustrations of men who paid too much for what they got, who wanted something too badly, who tried to get too much of it, did get too much of it, but didn't get peace of mind and balancing of their lives along with it. I think the saddest thing that ever came out of my research in building this philosophy was the things that I learned about the men, the wealthy men that collaborated in the building of this philosophy. The fact that they didn't get success along with their money was to me a sad thing indeed. They didn't get success because they became too obsessed with the importance of money and power and the power that money would give them. And you must curb the habit of expressing opinions which are not based upon facts or what you believe to be fact. Did you know that you didn't have a right to an opinion about anything? Not anything at all, unless you base it upon facts or what you believe to be facts? I'll bet you wouldn't admit that that's true. I'll bet you won't admit that that's true, that you have no right whatsoever to have an opinion about anything at any time unless it's based upon what you believe to be facts or actual provable facts. Now, why do I say you don't have a right to it? Because it is dangerous for you to have, you can do it. I mean, you have a right, of course, but I mean to say you have the responsibility of assuming what happens to you if you express an opinion that's not based upon facts or what you believe to be facts. You can fool yourself that way, and a lot of people go all the way through life fooling themselves by opinions that have no basis for existence. You must master the habit of being influenced by people in any manner whatsoever merely because you like them, or they are related to you, or they may have done you a favor. Now, I know that when you've gone the extra mile, you're going to put a lot of people under obligations to you, and I want you to do that. That's perfectly proper. That's legitimate, to put people under obligations to you by helping people. Now, that's nobody can find any fault with that. But be careful. Be careful in being influenced by people just because they have done you a favor. I'm talking now to the people for whom you've gone the extra mile, and you may be in that position sometimes too, where somebody's put you under obligations to an extent that you don't want to be put under obligations. You must form the habit of examining the motives of people who seek some benefit from or through your influence. You must control both your emotion of love and your emotion of hate in making decisions for any purpose, because either of these can unbalance your thinking habits. No man ought to make an important decision while he's angry. You just shouldn't do it. In correcting children, for instance, it's a bad mistake to discipline children when you're angry, because 9 times out of 10 you'll do and say the wrong thing, do more harm than good. And that applies to a lot of grown-ups too. If you're really angry, don't make decisions, don't make statements to people while you're mad, because they can come back on you and to do you an awful lot of injury. Self-control, self-discipline. You see, we have a lesson on self-discipline, you remember? It plays right along with this lesson, doesn't it? Because a lot of times if you're going to be an accurate thinker, you've got to have a lot of self-discipline. You've got to refrain from saying and doing a lot of things you'd like to say and do. Bide your time. There's always a time for you to do everything. Time what you say and do properly. And accurate thinkers do that too. They don't just fly off the handle and say they start their mouths to going and go off and leave them like some people do. They carefully study the effect on the listener of every word they utter, even before they utter it. Don't make any decisions or plans until you have carefully weighed what the effect may be on you and on other people. I can think of a lot of things I could do that would benefit me that wouldn't benefit you. Might even injure you. I can think of a lot of things. But I wouldn't engage in them because eventually I'd have to pay the price. Because whatever you do to or for another person, you do to or for yourself, it comes back to you, greatly multiplied. That's another thing comes under the heading of accurate thinking. You learn, after you've become thoroughly indoctrinated with this philosophy, you learn not to do anything that you don't want to come back and affect you. Not to think anything, not to say anything, not to do anything that you don't want to come back and that you have to give countenance to later on in life. You must recognize that before accepting as facts the statements of other people, it may be beneficial if you ask them how they came by the so-called facts. And when they express opinions, ask how you know your opinion is sound. I don't want an opinion, I want some facts. Then I'll form my own opinion. You give me the facts and I'll put them together in my own way, says the accurate thinker. You must learn to examine with extraordinary care all statements of a derogatory nature made by one person against others, because the very nature of such statements brands them as being not without bias, and that's putting it very politely. You must overcome the habit of trying to justify a decision you have made which turns out to have been unsound. Accurate thinkers just don't do that. They reverse themselves just as quickly as they make decisions if they find they're wrong. Alibis and accurate thinking never are friendly bedfellows. Excuses and alibis and accurate thinking are not friendly bedfellows. I have never seen the person yet that wasn't very adept at creating alibis for his faults and the things that he didn't do that he should have done, the things that didn't do that he shouldn't have done. In other words, most people have a great stock of them, and you don't have to give them very much time before they can fling them together and throw them at you. Good excuses, good alibis that they don't amount to a thing unless there's something back of them that's sound that you can depend upon. If you are an accurate thinker, you will never use the term "they say" or "I heard." Or accurate thinkers, in repeating things they have heard, first identify the source and attempt to establish its dependability. You know, folks, it's not an easy matter to be an accurate thinker. Have you reached that conclusion already? That's quite a little bit you have to pay in order to have it, but it's worth it, isn't it? It's worth trying. If you're not an accurate thinker, the people are going to take advantage of you. You're not going to get much out of life like you'd like to. You're not going to be satisfied. You'll never be a well-balanced person without accurate thinking. And in order to think accurately, you've got to have a set of rules to go by. And you'll find in this lesson, if you'll go over this lesson and study it carefully, add some notes to it of your own, start now to do some thinking, start to putting into practice tomorrow morning or before that time some of these principles of separating facts from information, and separating the facts themselves into two classes, important and unimportant. You just make those 4 steps along. This lesson will very much more than have justified yourself, and this lesson alone could well be worth 1,000 times as much as you have put into the entire course, if it teaches you just to do those simple things, to start separating facts from information. Be sure that you're dealing with facts, and then take the facts after you're dealing with them and break them down and throw off the